Hi everyone, this is Billy and you are listening to Humans of Authenticity, the CEO Special Edition. Our guest today is Cheretta Clerkley, the Executive Director at the Association for Positive Behavior Support. Welcome to Humans of Authenticity, Cheretta.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Would you like to introduce yourself to our listener first?
Yeah, my name is Cheretta Clerkley, as I am a C-suite leader with over 20 years of experience, particularly in medical associations. Over the last couple years, I've shifted into education, nonprofits, and I'm back into the space that mixes education with positive behavior support and a little bit of medical. So I'm really excited to talk to you all about that journey. But I'm most importantly, a mom of three, ranging from 13 to 2 years old. And so I am very busy, not only on the professional side, but also on the personal side.
Thank you so much for that. So, being a mom of three and the leader of an association, and I know that you've been volunteering for other organizations as well, what's your formula to balance your time so that you can be present for all of your audiences?
Yeah, I try to really assess where I want to spend my time. And some of the criteria that I use for that is it needs to be something where I feel like I'm making an impact. Or in some cases, I feel like a lot of the volunteer service that I work connects only to professionalism, but also to being a mom and helping my kids to learn new things and new skills. And so if I can mix those two together, I'm really excited about it. I recently just joined the Youth Activism Project board, and it really talks about inspiring young people to be able to leverage their voices no matter how young you are. And so this is something that I've been talking with my kids a lot about. And so it allows them an opportunity to be involved and figure out ways that they can do things within their own community to start to become the little leaders that they are, that hopefully will help to shape them into being contributing citizens to the society. And so I try to pick things that I know have meaning not only to me, but that I can leverage those examples as I parent with my husband.
It's so cool how you start them young to think about leveraging their voice. Can you share one of the particular conversations you have with them about this area?
Yeah. So my daughter, who is 7, is a very vocal and what we may call a sassy little young lady. I don't know where she gets that from. We talk a lot about using our voices to help to make sure that we are being an example of how it is to be kind or to help someone who maybe doesn't have that sassy voice that she has. How can you be a good friend in that way? And I think particularly with my 13-year-old, as he's becoming older, he is more on the quiet, reserved side, but I'm trying to help him to leverage his voice in a way that's positive and contributing in a positive direction. And I think that that's something that I learned early on with my parents. And so I really try to instill that with them. You have a voice and it matters, and we should be using it in a positive ways to help to not only shape the communities in which we live, but also to lend our perspective to others who may not really understand that. And I think helping them to feel more comfortable with that at an early age allows them the opportunity as they move into spaces like college and their first job to be able to advocate for themselves. Because a lot of times, if you don't have that strong sense of your voice and knowing when to use it, even when you might be a little afraid, making those hard choices early on can help you to be more courageous. And so I try to give them the opportunity to express themselves in that way because my parents did that for me. And I think it really has helped me throughout not only a professional journey, but my professional journey as well.
Like how you say, if you don't have a strong sense of your voice and how you use it, it can be just a miss of opportunities. And this is a question from me personally. I know that sometimes I have thoughts and I could formulate thoughts, but I don't know what is a good opportunity to raise it. How should I approach it? Where do I start? What sort of mindset should I go with when I'm sharing this thought with someone else? Do you have some tips or guidance that I can share my thoughts with my counterparts.
Yeah, I don't know if it's okay at this point to talk a little bit about the word. So I'll go ahead and I'll share a little bit about that. One, I was racking my brain because you had so many good options for words. And I was like, oh, I can relate to so many. But I thought the one that resonated with me the most was around ego and alter ego. And the reason why I chose that is because we started off talking about your voice matters and how do you use your voice to help to not only elevate you with where you are, but help to get you to where you eventually want to be, whatever that career long term goal is. And I feel like I've leveraged my alter ego to help me to use my voice, even in times when it felt deathly afraid to. It's given me that courage to say the things that I needed to say to help me to advance in my career. And so I think the idea and this notion of having an ego sometimes get a negative connotation. It doesn't mean that you have to be a mean person, that you don't have to accept others' thoughts and perspectives. I think a lot of successful people have alter egos, it's particularly when they're insecure about certain things within themselves. If you look at Kobe Bryant, he used the Black Mamba when he was trying to reinvigorate his career. Beyonce used Sasha Fierce because a part of her was really shy. And so I kind of look at those examples as ways to help me to use my voice in different situations. And I think throughout my career, there's been opportunities where one, I've been the youngest on a C suite team, the
Yeah.
only female of color. And so sometimes it's really hard to figure out where do I fit into this conversation at this table? And how can I be taken seriously? And so in those moments, I try to pull on my own sense of my alter ego to say, you know what, I need to take this risk. I need to make a hard decision. I need to go for it. And every time that I've done that, it has not always been easy, but the reward after has been transforming for me. There were opportunities early on in my first director role where I was responsible for transforming a corporate program related to fundraising. And there were a lot of things that were not set up in place that would allow me to actually move at the pace that the CEO wanted. And she had very lofty goals for me. And so it made me have to say, you know what? I want to be successful in this role, but I also have to communicate that I don't have the systems in place to allow me to be as successful as I could be. And so I needed to have a very direct conversation with her around setting our expectations so that we could be on the same page. And in some cases, bringing information that she thought was already taken care of. And so sometimes when you're the person that's the messenger, that can, cause a lot of friction and tension. But her response and reaction was very positive toward me. It was, I never knew that. No one has ever come to me and brought this information forward. And not only did you come with this information, you came with solutions. I gave her 3 different options. We sat through, we talked through it. We came up with the plan that was going to work best for us in order to help to propel the organization forward. And at that exact moment, even though I had a lot of fear, I had a lot of insecurities because I didn't want them to think, okay, she's new in this role, she's coming to us, she's already having an issue. The response that she gave me showed me that the expectation is not that I know everything, but how do I position that information in a way that she can receive it and to be able to help to support me. And coming with that solution oriented approach really allowed me to do that.
That is such a great story. I really appreciate that. That gave me a lot of courage to, and I like how you say that we are not expected to know everything. It's the way that we frame it and we share what we know and what we don't know. Sometimes can become an important starting point of our conversations. I think it make it
Mhm.
a lot more approachable. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. You mentioned earlier that you've been in the association sectors for over 20 years. Thinking about the entire journey, what is the one thing that you like the most about yourself in that journey?
I think it goes back to what we were discussing around my motherhood journey. It's something that early on my parents taught me, and it was when you get into positions where You have more of an opportunity to create spaces for other people to help leverage and lift other people up. You should not be afraid to use your voice in a way that helps them to do that. And so for me, the most rewarding thing is as I've been able to elevate within my career, I've been really keen on figuring out who are the individuals within my team or that I have a connection with in other departments that maybe have sometimes not had the opportunity to work on the big projects or the other opportunities that are new within the association. How can I help to bring them into the fold and give them a platform where I can shine my light on them so that they can help to hopefully bring someone behind them because a leader took time to position them in another way. That to me has been really rewarding when I think about the teams that I've managed, how I've been able to help to mentor some of those professionals and see them progress and realize their career dreams. That's so rewarding because it's making such a positive impact within the association space. We need leaders, we need a pipeline for leaders, and we need those leaders to reflect what the society looks like that we're serving. And so the more that we can have those diverse perspectives and positions where they can make an impact to share their voice and lend those perspectives, I think the better we are as a society, as a community, as an association space.
I'm hearing a lot of lead by examples here from you. I'm seeing how your style can influence the people that you are working with in a way that you are passing on your approach to things. And hopefully that they will learn from it and they're more comfortable in demonstrating it in the same way. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to bring this conversation back to your leadership positions. And I'd love to hear what is your mantra now that you are in the top leaders of the rank for your organization.
Yeah, I think for me, it's trust your gut. It's really simple. I feel like every time where I've been kind of swayed or influenced to move in a direction that maybe I wasn't 100% confident in, it has not turned out the way that I would have wanted the outcome to be. But every time that I've trusted my gut, and sometimes that means saying no to opportunities, taking some time to get the infrastructure in place, or whatever it may be, the right member of the team in place, those times that I've trusted my gut have always turned out to be 100% better, even if it didn't go perfectly. And so I really try to trust my gut and make the hard decisions because every time that I've done that, it's allowed me to be more courageous. And every time that I haven't done that, it has allowed me to sit back in a space where I have not been the most comfortable because I knew I should have trusted my gut. So I try not to be in situations where I rush to make decisions, where I don't try to think of all of the different impacts that it may have, really allowing myself to know that I'm in the position that I'm in because I've been entrusted to make the best choices to help to move the organization forward. And so I really try to be able to take that time to listen to my inner gut.
This is interesting. I know that in leadership positions and when we have to make hard decisions, we have to get data and perspectives and consultations and the like. Can you share with me a story when you've had to make one of those hard decisions? I just love to hear your thought process within the context.
Yeah, I think I can use an example with my current organization. I'm coming into an organization that has been mostly volunteer led for the last 21 years. And so there are a lot of things that needed to change in order to help to not only modernize us as an association, but also start to think of how we can be more inclusive to other communities that should be aware of positive behavior support and the value of being a part of our association. And so, in a lot of ways, there is a change management situation occurring right now where, of course, there are the early adopters where people are so excited, they want to roll up their sleeves and they want to start to move in that process. And there are also people who are very much like, oh, the way we've always done things is the way that we should continue to do things. And, I don't want to move forward in that direction. And so it's really about crafting that narrative and providing the data and the information for them to be able to see, hey, we've been doing this for the last 21 years. Have we seen any growth in this particular area? Have we seen any changes in terms of getting us corporate funding or sponsorship or things of that nature? It can't just be about one particular measurement, which is I personally really love it and benefit for it. How can we help everybody to get that same experience? And so having those conversations are really difficult, right? And on some days, I'm not everybody's favorite person because I may not necessarily see it that way. But I don't think there's anything wrong with constructive criticism, right? You want to be able to hear the dissenting views and opinions. And I think at the end of the day, you may have to agree to disagree, but you come back to how are we going to measure the success of this? If we're trying something new and different, there has to be an accountability perspective to it. And so being able to then come back and say, here's the data that we have as a benchmark, and we're going to use the next 12 months, 18 months to figure out if this new direction is actually moving us more toward the future direction of the goals that we have. And so taking that time to make sure that people have an opportunity to kind of voice whatever their concerns are. But as a leader, it's important for me to be able to say, okay, we've done that process. And if we just continue to just do, and that, I don't want to move forward, I don't want to move forward, then there's a loss to the association if we're not ready to kind of so-called pull the trigger to start to move forward. And it's my job to protect us from losing out on opportunities because we are making decisions too slow.
Thank you so much for that. I'm hearing a very clear thought process, and I'm hearing how you build in the narrative so that you can frame the same problem differently. And I like how you start with, we have done that for the last 20 years. Have you seen any change? What was the reactions when you pose those questions to your peers?
Yeah, it is very interesting. I would say we have a lot of support and excitement moving forward in this new direction. There are some who are just not willing to move forward in that direction. And not that we want to say, okay, we don't want to move forward with you. We have to give people the space. And when you're going through change, you have to understand that not everybody's going to be getting on the ship with you, but you always want to leave space in a seat for them so that, when they're ready, they can always come back. And I try to find ways to say, you may not agree with this particular decision, but there's still opportunities for you to continue to be involved. And that is your choice, right? But if I have to continue to hold up the whole organization for one person, that's not being a leader, right? We have to continue to move forward. But I think having that open door policy, I'm always willing to hear that feedback as long as it's done in a constructive way. And we're all coming from the space of, we really believe in the mission of the association. And we may have different ways that we think about getting there. A lot of the times that I've experienced this in other organizations from a change management or turnaround perspective, what I have found is sometimes those who are the loudest dissenters, once they start to see the plan and execution and the results of that, they quickly turn around because then it's like, oh, I don't want to miss out. It's almost like that FOMO, like I don't want to be the only one that's not, helping to move it forward. And so sometimes it takes time, but the majority of the organization, I feel, is excited about the direction that we're going. There are a lot of exciting things on the horizon for us. And so I try to keep that the main focus and also leave space to have those conversations with those who don't necessarily agree. And I think the most important thing is trying not to get in that headspace of taking it personal. Being a leader isn't easy, right? It's making those hard choices because that's what you believe is the right thing to do. And so I try to make sure that I'm demonstrating and illustrating that at all times so that people see that not only have your voices been heard, but in some cases, when you are operating a business, you have to make difficult decisions and not everybody's going to be happy. And as a leader, I have to understand that and just continue to model the way.
That is really cool. Let's get into the keyword conversations. And you've already alert to ego and outer ego. And thank you for your feedback on the list. I think it is a fun process to start thinking about the conversations. I'm curious, if there are any connections between ego, alter ego, and your mantra as a CEO?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are insecurities that we all have as humans, right? We all have something professionally, personally that we wish we could be doing better or differently. And I think what I've learned is a lot of times the ego and the alter ego are really connected. It's not like you're two separate people. It's just giving you that extra boost, that momentum to help to propel you forward when you're in situations where you are really feeling insecure, right? There have been so many times throughout my career where I've wanted to say something, where I've wanted to challenge that in my mind, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking of all the ways that it could go wrong, right? And the alter ego part of me comes in to say, well, what happens if you don't say anything and the decision is made and you had an opportunity, you had a seat at the table and you didn't say anything? That is when I think that alter ego part of me comes in and kind of protects me in a way where it's like you all of a sudden have this high energy and this perspective to say, you know what, I might be scared, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so when I talk about trusting my gut, that doesn't mean that it's easy to do that, right? There's a level of fear and risk. And what if all these other things happen from an external perspective to impact a decision that you made internally? But I feel like the alter ego part of me challenges me to be able to speak up and to make really hard decisions. And it helps me to become more of who I'm meant to be, my authentic self. And we all talk about being authentic at work, right? That doesn't mean that it's easy, right? And in some spaces, it's not necessarily safe to always be your authentic self at work. And so the alter ego, I really feel helps us to do it in a way where it's not brash, but it just gives you that extra courage that you may need.
Thank you. I'm drawn to what you mentioned that I might be scared, but I'll do it anyway. And I'm looking for another story here. If you have something to share with us?
Yeah, I've been in associations at a time where there was a lot of external turmoil happening within our society. If I think about when I was with the American Psychiatric Association, I joined at a time right around the George Floyd incident, right? And so there were a lot of conversations that were happening internally, not only at our association, but I think companies in general, talking about how could we really focus more on diversity and inclusion efforts, and what really do we need to do to ensure that employees of all different races, genders, sexuality be able to come to work and really be their full selves, right? And there were a lot of conversations happening at that time that I felt were really missing the mark. And I had opportunities to be a part of some of those conversations and share opportunities around it's not something that's going to be a cookie cutter approach. If we're really truly saying that we want to create DEI statements and opportunities for people to feel like they're inclusive, it doesn't mean just having those conversations. It also means putting some action behind that and creating plans where people can tangibly, concretely see what are we doing from a pay? What are we doing when we're looking at promoting different individuals? The same experiences for people of color may not be the same for those who are, not. And so how are we really doing a deep dive and looking into that? And so I raised my voice and said, I don't think that we're getting it right. And I think that there are better ways that we could do that. And that was a risk. I mean, I was with the organization at the time. I started back in March, and the George Floyd incident happened in June of that year. And so it wasn't like I was a staple within the organization, but I felt like everybody was talking about it outside of the meetings, but nobody was feeling courageous enough to bring it forward to leadership. And so I took that risk, and it actually ended up being something that propelled me into new opportunities, new seats at the table, where I was able to be with leadership and help to craft a lot of different programs and work with different members of the association to help to propel the DEI efforts forward.
That is very inspirational. I'm hearing your dedication to make sure that none of these conversations become service. And I also see that these types of conversations will impact hugely on the glass ceiling situations. Do you have a comment or stories around this area that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that the glass ceiling, I think, is something that people are very familiar with, but something that we don't do such a great job of talking about is the glass cliff, right? And that's when you are a minority, female in particular, with coming into an association, a company, an organization, whatever. And you are finally in this position, your dream position, right? And in some cases, you are dealing with microaggressions. You are dealing with this title that gives you this sense of authority, but not really the tools, the systems in place, infrastructure, and in some cases, budget to be able to do the things that you need to do to be successful within your career. And I think, particularly over the last, I would say, year and a half, 2 years, where I've experienced that feeling like, oh my gosh, I've got to this dream job. Everything leading up to that point made it seem like it was going to be one way. And then you get into the position and you realize, oh, there isn't really a supportive team, there isn't a supportive leadership. And so you start to feel like, oh my gosh, have I made this decision and it's not the best, right? And I've tried to work in environments that I knew weren't necessarily the best environments for me, but I believed in the mission, I believed in the organization and wanted to help to move them forward, even with the limited perceived perception that I have. But it also goes back to a passion of mine where we talked about early on around mentoring. It's really hard to elevate and believe that you can be something within your company organization when you don't see anyone who looks like you. And so that pressure and knowing that made me think differently about how to respond to microaggressions or not having the most supportive leader to be able to help to support me, because I am thinking of my 7-year-old daughter. One day she's going to enter into the workplace, and I don't want her to have to deal with some of the things that I've had to experience. And so I choose to stay and to fight and to elevate my voice and to do the best that I can in any situation that I'm in, because I believe that you can chip away at helping people to better understand how to support women of color, individuals who are of different sexual orientations. It's really important that we all feel valued, that we actually have a seat at the table. And so it's critical that we don't necessarily give up and feel defeated. Figuring out how to work in those systems is really important. And then at some point, you have to make the decision for yourself whether to stay or to leave. But I always try to look at it as, how can I use this opportunity to make a difference, even in my small way, to make it better for the people who are coming behind me? And I always think about my daughter when I'm in those kind of scenarios.
Yeah, a lot of my guests also share how their kids become the inspirations for them to make an impact and do good in the society. Thank you so much for sharing these case studies. I think it is very interesting, and I'm hearing a lot of cultural issues and a lot of value misalignments in the stories that you've just shared. Are you comfortable to unpack from your perspective who should be accountable for that culture? I'm hearing some missing of tangible
Mhm.
support for success as well. Who should be accountable for the gap that we are seeing here?
Yeah, I think it really starts at the top. One thing that I have learned over my career, particularly, we are in association environments, right? And so the top of that pyramid is the governance structure, right? And if you don't have a board that is educated around DEI, if you don't have a board who is ensuring that they're supporting their leadership team to make sure that they have the resources they need to build the future pipeline and what that looks like, what that criteria should be. I do think that it makes it very difficult to change environments that are toxic. It's easy to look the other way when it's not impacting you. But at the end of the day, it impacts the association, it impacts the future leaders that will want to elevate and rise to these things. And I think it's very interesting. The Nonprofit Times, about a year ago, I believe, did an article where they really talked about a lot of minority women, particularly Black women, who are completely leaving the association space because they don't feel that they have that support from a leadership perspective and that they have these titles, but no perceived power. And so we should be having conversations as a board, as a leadership team around, are we building an inclusive culture? Are we providing opportunities to help to create a pipeline that's going to benefit the organization? If we are trying to impact communities outside of our internal environment, if you don't have people at the table with diverse perspectives, I do think that that impacts membership. It impacts people wanting to be involved in your association. And so there is a revenue dollar component to that. And sometimes money talks before anything else. And so really trying to help to align those two things, I think it's really critical. It takes all of us. But I think it really starts with that board and that senior C-suite leadership level.
Just taking a step back, observing the conversation so far, I love how you name everything so clearly. With your response just now, I noted down that we give people title with no perceived power, and there is nothing that is clearer than that. I want to flip the perspective here on this case study. So now that you are in the positions that you can influence change and strengthen the governance structure, how do you create space so that every title are supported and can be successful?
Yeah, I think it first starts with education. You really have to understand the role and the responsibilities. And we're actually going through this right now with my association from a governance perspective. As I shared, I'm coming into an organization that was primarily volunteer led. And so this is the first time that they've had a full-time nonprofit C-suite leader in that executive director role. And so we are going through a series of exercises to help the board understand what are their responsibilities in order to be a high performing board. How are they going to hold me accountable? And what are my responsibilities from an operational perspective? And in my case, I laid that vision out and painted it to the board and then said, I don't want it just to be my voice who's providing this information to you. We need to seek outside governance consultant who has that expertise and knowledge to give us an independent third-party review of how we're currently operating and if we're doing things well or if we need to particularly make some shifts to help us to be more high performing. And that has been something that has been really eye-opening to a lot of the members of the board. When you are a working board, it's very different to moving from a working board to a high performing board that's going to really be looking at loyalty, duty, care, the foundations and tenet of governance. And so having independent consultant come in and help to work with the executive committee to help to train all of us so that we can be the best to benefit the association has been really eye-opening. And I've really enjoyed that process because I've learned a lot too. Like I said, I don't know every single thing. I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to lead the full board all by myself. So being able to have that perspective, I think has helped us all grow and professionally stretch. And that's really the goal, right? We all want to be the best version of ourselves in whatever positions that we have. And so having that level of support has really helped to propel us in the direction that we want to move.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much from this conversation so far. So now I want us to again do that exercise looking at your entire career so far.
Okay.
I'm interested in how your ego and outer ego evolve or transform from the first time that you are in this space compared to your leadership positions today. How can you describe the transition here?
Yeah, I would say when you're starting out in more of junior roles, you're starting to get and grow your confidence, right? And so your alter ego kind of helps sometimes to fuel you, but it can also trick you into thinking that you know a little bit more than you do, right? And there's been situations where I feel like mid career for me, you just sometimes get really comfortable because you have a formula that's working for you, right? Advance in your career, you taking on larger budgets, larger teams, and it's like, okay, I'm on my way. And then it becomes a little stagnant, and then you start to look around and see your peers doing one thing, and you're kind of like, well, I'm kind of still in the same space. What's happening here? And so there's been instances where that comfortability has left me questioning my value within a particular association, or maybe this is all there is for me, right? And then you hear your alter ego on the other side saying, no, you need to push yourself. You need to challenge yourself. You need to learn new skills. And so I've taken that inner voice and leverage that to help me to do things that I was really afraid to do. Going back to school to get my MBA, I did certifications to help to advance my skill set. So these were all things that I was doing while I had babies in between, right? So there were times where it was more focused on the professional side, and there were times when it was more focused on the personal side, raising my kids and motherhood. And so there had to be a balance, but I try to not let me get comfortable in the spaces where I know I can do really well in and it's not really a challenge. I want to continue to evolve and grow. And so it goes back to, are you making hard decisions even when you're uncomfortable? And that alter ego part of me helps me with all my insecurities continue to push past that barrier to do new things. I thought for me, if I look at my career, I started out in marketing and communications. How I ended up as a C-suite leader, it was not the typical journey, right? I thought the height of my career when I started out would be, I want to be a chief communications officer or a CMO. And then when I got into that role, I was really comfortable, but I didn't feel challenged. I didn't feel like all of the best parts of me were able to be represented in that particular role. And so I started to investigate, what do I like? And so I made a lot of shifts in my career to be able to try new things. And I think the alter ego part of me really allowed me to have that courage and confidence to explore all those paths, which led me to where I am today.
That is really cool. You really remind me that the association sectors are really welcoming in terms of position, in terms of functionalities. And if I can share a little bit of my perspective on this, I started in Marcom too. I had a bachelor degree in communications and I started in a marketing role for farmer societies. And then I moved to policy and professional developments and events and memberships. So this conversation resonates a lot for me.
Mm.
And you really paint the path that I could get there if it is something that I set my mindset for. So thank you for wrapping it up for me. Before we're moving to the next part of this conversation, is there anything else you want to share about ego and alter ego?
I would just say that I really hope this conversation that we have help people to understand it can be a really positive thing if you leverage it in the way that it encourages you to step outside the box. And for me, stepping outside of the box is not always the easiest thing to do, right? I'm very linear type A personality. And so sometimes when the unknown isn't known, it can be really scary, right? And you can overthink and sometimes talk yourself out of doing things. I would challenge everyone to think about how you could leverage your alter ego to be that cheerleader on your shoulder to help push you into new opportunities that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily tried. But doing that adds another skill into your career toolbox that will help you to ultimately get to where you want to go. And I know for me, I've benefited from looking at it from that perspective.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you flagged earlier that they have a lot of negative notions to it. But I love how you put the positive spin to it, and it makes total sense the way you use both in your perspective and in your stories. I'd like to move to the legacy piece. What legacy do you envision cultivating within your organizations today?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really going to be around modernization. Associations sometimes can get in the habit of wanting to stay the same and not evolve. And I think that that can be a hindrance for us if we're not willing to adapt to change and to the environment around us. And I think you see that a lot when you think of membership and what membership looked like back in 1970 is not like what it looks like now. And what the expectations that our members have is very different. And so for me, I would like to leave a legacy of continuing to evolve to meet where we are today. And that includes using technology in new ways, leveraging how it is that we connect with our external companies and members and bringing them into the fold to help us to build the future that we know can impact the different audiences we serve. That's something that's really important to me, and to think of it differently. When you think of modernization, when you think of change, that means a constant state of evolving. And that means uncomfortability, right? And so it goes back to what we were talking about when we think of ego, alter ego. If we are going to be stagnant and not moving forward in a direction where members want to feel a part of our community, that is going to leave a disservice to the communities that we serve. And so helping the organization to see that and to do that in a way that impacts our community positively is really going to me be the test of my leadership and influence, helping them to continue to evolve, evaluate, and hold accountable the systems, the programs that we put in place to ensure that we're moving forward and not backwards.
Thank you. You remind me of a quote in a book about the world moving constantly. So if we are not moving with the world, we are stepping backwards.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good perspective. So with that legacy, what structure or culture of the organizations or value will you put in place to support this legacy?
Yeah, I think probably a theme that we didn't even realize when we were picking the word, which is around ensuring that in order to move constantly, you have to have new voices, you have to have new perspectives, you have to have new ideas, you have to create spaces where people feel safe enough to bring those ideas forward. And so an inclusive culture is something that's really going to be important, right? Because you need those peer to peer connections to be able to come up with innovative solutions and programs. And so I really want to allow people a space where they can leverage their expertise, but also use their voices to bring things that maybe as an association we've overlooked in the past that we want to make sure are front and center as we move forward and modernize our organization. A safe space, one that is inclusive of everybody, but also welcoming of new ideas and also welcoming of those who dissent against those ideas so that we can have a community that challenges us all to be better. I think is really going to be critical for the growth of not only my association that I'm a part of, but any organization. Change is, like you said, constant. And so we have to be willing to look at things differently in order to continue to evolve.
Thank you. I'm hearing a very strong sense of willingness to try new things. And I like how you say inclusive of everyone, welcoming new ideas, and have a platform for disagreement to happen in healthy conversations as well.
Mhm.
So imagine that if you were to leave tomorrow, what would happen to this legacy?
I think the goal that I have as a leader is I want to be able to empower people who maybe necessarily didn't feel that they could use their voice in a way to make a difference or an impact. And I've seen this happen at other organizations I've been a part of and have since left. When people can see you leverage your voice, your expertise for things that really matter and care to you in a way that represents you professionally, but also challenges other people in a healthy way, that gives them the courage to do that. And so I feel like I'm working with various leaders within the organization and giving them that space so that they can elevate their own voices. It doesn't always have to be my voice. And it's really important to take that into consideration because, like you said, as leaders, it doesn't mean we're going to be here for 40 years, right? But you want to create an organization that now has the platforms to be able to hear those voices and not only hear them, but take action with them. And what does that process look like? So, building an infrastructure that enables them to do that is really important.
I'm hearing that lead by examples here again, and that say a lot about how your work impact the organizations, your team, and culture. Thank you for sharing that. We have two more questions left, and I'm hoping that you have fun with these two.
It's been
So,
great. I've loved it.
thank you. So, now imagining that your organizations were a fictional character, who would it be and why?
Now, this is what came to mind when you said that. Stuart Little, having that kind of mighty energy, but being in a small body. I think we're small, but we're mighty, and we're at this point where we're re-engaging, galvanizing our membership to get behind this new vision to help to take us forward. And sometimes when you're small, your voice is not always heard. And so you want to really try to raise up in a way that inspires people to get behind that vision. And so that was what immediately came to mind. We might be small, but I believe that we're going to be mighty as we get people inspired and aligned with the new vision, the new plan to move forward. And I think that we're going to ultimately end up having a more positive impact because we'll be creating a more inclusive space where people will want to be a part of that journey with us. That's at least my hope.
And I love how you selected a minority group of the fictional characters as well. Thank you so much for picking out that characters for us. So, thinking about Stuart Little, thinking about your leadership position, how would you ensure that you have proper structure so that Stuart Little can become the hero of his own story?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're in the midst of a lot of change right now, changing the entire model of the association and leveraging resources to help us to get to that vision, that lofty goal that we have. And that means making a lot of hard choices internally. We're changing the entire infrastructure of an organization, and that makes people really nervous. But it's really important in order to get to that end goal. We have to have the right team in place in order to propel us forward in the direction that we want to move. And sometimes that means seeking out external experts that are not within our current infrastructure because they have the bandwidth, the expertise to help us to go further, quicker, faster, to help us to get to that end goal, the shiny gold post that we're all trying to race toward. And so for me, it means taking that step back and really evaluating. If we say we want to be here by 2026 or 2027, what are the things that we need to put in place in order to help us to get there? And who can help us to get there? And a direction that's going to support the sustainability of that infrastructure. And so that means making hard choices, making decisions differently than how we have been making them, and then evaluating them using the data that you so eloquently talked about. And I think that that's both because we have that COO mindset of the operating infrastructure pieces, but all of those pieces come together. And that means moving the association into more of a technology data driven model, which is very different than the model that they had. But I do believe that as we start to make these incremental changes, the value that the association will see as we do those will be great.
Thank you so much for that. It's very inspirational. And this is the end of the episode. Thank you again for your time and sharing your story with us today.
Right. My name is Cheretta Clerkley, and you are listening to Humans of Authenticity, the CEO Special Edition.